Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome, welcome, welcome. You have found us at Crime Time on A Mighty Blaze. This is a special time for Crime Time. It is 3 p.m. ET, but we have such a special guest that I did not want you to miss her. I'm your host, Hank Phillippi Ryan, the USA Today bestselling author of 14 going on 15 novels of suspense. I need to thank you right now because the trade paperback of The House Guest just went into a second printing, and that is you. And I'm so happy about that. Thank you so much for that. My new book, thank you, Kirsty. My new book, One Wrong Word, comes out in February. I cannot wait for you to read that. But that's not what we're here about today. We're here about this marvelous, absolutely terrific book, The Paris Mystery by Kirsty Manning. Now, you need to know, crime timers, that Kirsty is in Melbourne, Australia, where it is 5 a.m. Let's just have that sink in. It is 5 in the morning. How do you look so completely gorgeous and cool at 5 in the morning, Kirsty?
The red lipstick, I think. I had a cold shower quickly to wake myself up and then.
Oh my golly. We are so grateful for that. You are such a stalwart. If I had to do something at 5 in the morning, I will tell you all, crime timers, you will never see me at 5 in the morning. You will never, knock on wood, see me at 5 in the morning. So all hail Kirsty, who is pulling it together for this. This is a marvelous, fast-paced, lovely novel, sort of sexy Agatha Christie, Kirsty says. Kirsty, tell us, have you always been an Agatha Christie fan? Is this new? Is this since the time you were a child?
No, it's relatively new. I actually went back to reading the books after the new, releases of the movies came out. And so I went back and read them and loved them. And then I started reading her memoirs and then I read books about how she wrote and, lots of books about Agatha Christie. I kind of went down a rabbit hole of Agatha Christie and became quite obsessed and, thought how fun would it be to write a locked door mystery?
I mean, she was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And when you read the books that talk about her writing process, you get even more impressed, don't you, about how careful and clever and thoughtful she was.
She really was the master of crime writing. The joy of Agatha Christie is that it looks so simple and simple cast of characters, but her characterization is so astute. The very premise of the locked door mystery, whether you're on the Nile or on the Orient Express, they're very, very sharp, very clever, very pointed. In just a few words, she can describe someone or assassinate someone with her words, and it's quite extraordinary.
And they're always fair, and that's what I love about the Paris Mystery as well. It's completely fair. The reader knows everything. If only they were as clever as you were, we could have figured it out. But you've done a marvelous job. Dame Agatha would be so happy about it. And I can't imagine it. I know she'd be just delighted with sexy Agatha Christie. She probably could be that. So that's kind of cool. Book Page had wonderful words for this novel. They called it a fizzy, fast-paced caper full of glitz, glamour, and intrigue. And then it says, Manning highlights the opulence and decadence of interwar Paris in this engaging and delightful mystery. And that's all true. But there's more to this book than that. It is fizzy, but it's also thought-provoking and revealing. And don't you think so? Did you mean that to be when you started, or did it just develop that way? And we can talk more about the plot in a minute, but.
Yeah, it just developed. I think, as you beautifully put, I did have this idea of writing a sexy Agatha Christie. I wanted it to be at the top line, light, glamorous. I wanted to set it in 1938 Paris, so that really heady era of crazy parties, full of, masquerade balls and haute couture and, swimming pools filled up with Krug champagne. And, there was a decadence and a naivety in that era. And I wanted to set it in that time. But as you write, you really have to give your characters a backstory. You need some ballast to them in order for it to be believable. My character, Charlie James, she's an Australian journalist. She's a fish out of water in Paris. And she has some real, as we would say in Australia, some real chops.
Yes, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that in a minute. So this is incredibly fun to read, you all. And I see people coming now. Here is Kim, welcome. And so many people are coming. I'm floating through when I look over here, I'm looking at the comments, you all. Here is Kim and Mary, who's commenting on the lipstick that always works. It is marvelous to see you all. Yes, that's a major plot point in the Ghosts of Paris. In the Ghosts of Paris, yes, I can't wait for this. Paris is very de rigueur these days, and we are very happy about that. If you are new to A Mighty Blaze, let me take a moment to welcome you and remind you that A Mighty Blaze was started at the beginning of the pandemic into year 4 now, by Jenna Blum and Caroline Levitt, such a powerhouse duo, to keep us chatting about books and discovering new books and talking to new authors and learning about wonderful new things to read, and secretly to keep your TBR piles going up and up and up. And we hope you will add this, not right now, but in about 30 minutes when this is over. And one of you will win. One of you will not have to buy it. One of you will win a copy of The Paris Mystery. Thank you. Look at this. On 2 continents, we are holding up this novel. That's kind of cool. We'll have a chance to win this. So ask a question or leave a comment for Kirsty about Agatha Christie or this gorgeous cover or Paris or her research or just in general. Tip a glass of champagne to her and you will be entered to win a copy of the novel. And I will promise you I will stop talking in about 10 seconds, but let me tell you a little bit about Kirsty. Kirsty is the best-selling author of 4 historical fiction books, including The Song of the Jade Lily and The French Gift. And she has a new book coming out in Australia next week, and we will ask her about that briefly. Then we'll invite her back to come here and tell us about it when it comes out in the US. The Paris Mystery is her first foray into classic mysteries and a sexy Agatha Christie style type mystery set in pre-war Paris. Her historical novels have been published in Australia and New Zealand, North America, UK, South Africa, and translated into many languages, including German, Dutch, Hebrew, Russian, and Serbian. I'd love to see the covers of this book. Is it translated into other languages as well?
Yes, they're translated. I think this one hasn't. This one is the Australian cover.
Oh, look at that. That is so slinky and sultry, and I just love that.
So that's if I hold up the American cover, but I haven't got the translated covers. They'll filter through to me eventually, I guess. But,
yes, there'll be so much fun.
It takes some time in publishing.
It does indeed take some time. It does indeed take some time. It's funny too that the version in the US is sort of spunky girl with champagne. And the UK version is, slinky, sultry woman,
yes,
with champagne, I guess. Anyway, grew up in northern New South Wales, Australia, and has degrees in literature and communications. She lives in Melbourne. With her husband, she is a partner in the award-winning Melbourne wine bar, The Lotta. And what a cool life. What a cool life. And congratulations on your mad success. So tell us a little bit about this book. What is the basic plot of the book? And then we'll talk about the rest of it in a minute.
So the basic plot is Charlie James is a journalist in Australia, a young journalist. She has a French mother, and she decides she needs to leave Australia. It's her job in the newsroom in Australia is very constricting. As you can imagine, it's quite misogynistic in 1938, and she wants some adventure. There is, I guess, precedence for Australian journalists. There were early coverers of the war, female journalists, I should say, that really broke some of the major stories for the Times in London and several other news organisations, being literally in the trenches during the war. So there is plausible story of strong Australian women on tour covering big international stories, even back in the 1920s, 1910. So she arrives in Paris. She, she's pretty damaged when she gets there. She's been hurt by a man she loved very much. She's left her family behind, and she's told that she has to get close to a particular, I guess, society couple, an American heiress, Lady Ashworth, and her diplomat husband, who's British. And the the book opens with a party, a really glamorous masquerade ball, and that is actually based on a real ball that happened with an American heiress called Elsie de Wolfe. I couldn't make this up. It had everyone and anyone, like the Rothschilds, artists, Gertrude Stein, everyone there in their haute couture. There were elephants, people entering on elephants and bareback, and of course there were acrobats, there was champagne, cocktails. There was actually a circus tent. It was called a circus ball, and hence the acrobats and the elephants. And they actually had marquee circus tents set up for cocktail bars and food. And, as a young Australian journalist, she'd never seen a party anything like this. And naturally, being a mystery novel, somebody dies at the party, and then Charlie's first job in Paris really is to find out who done it.
I just love it. I mean, it's marvelous. The couple of things, three things. The entrance of Charlie is marvelous. I'll talk about that first. The party is incredible. And I have to say, as an avid mystery writer and also as a big Agatha Christie fan, I sort of figured something would happen at the party, but I did not predict who the victim would be. I did not predict that. And I just stood and applauded you at that moment because that was really clever and really logical and good. I just didn't figure it out. So going back to, I love the scene when Charlie arrives in Paris. Very, page 2 of the book. Can you tell a little bit about that scene, how it unfolds? Here she is, the fish out of water. Here she is, Alice in Wonderland, going into this new world. Talk a little bit about her arrival and what it was like to write that.
It was actually a lot of fun. It's based a little bit on a true story of a friend of mine arriving on a job in Japan, actually, where she was fluent in Japanese, and she turned up for her reporter job in Japan, and they hadn't seen her on camera before, and it turned out she wasn't Japanese. So so I do a bit of that in this book. Obviously, back in 1938, there's no photographs attached, and without giving too much away, she has applied for this position at the behest of her editor-in-chief. She's on the platform. She's greeted by a very grumpy man who doesn't have a lot of time and didn't realize quite what he was getting, didn't realize that Charlie James was Charlie James female, not Charlie James. And he's accompanied by his assistant, Violet, who is very clever, speaks 7.5 languages, very warm, very glamorous. She's an international, she's not a socialite, but she is very social. She's from good family. She's very fluent. And so their encounter on the platform, she's thrust into the smell of coffee and baking crepes. And, you see it when you arrive in Paris straight away. If anyone has traveled there, they will know as soon as you step off the plane or the train or the bus, however you get there, you're stepping into a different world. People dress a little bit smarter. They've got their red lipstick on. They've got their, they won't necessarily be wearing expensive clothes, but they'll just be wearing a few things very well, and they'll walk around with that nonchalance. So she stepped in. It's her first time in a country speaking where the language is foreign, even though she understands French. So it's this assault of the new. And I just wanted her to have that magical moment where she's shocked, and her first impression from her boss is not completely warm and welcoming.
As has to be. Anybody who's watched Mary Tyler Moore, this is sort of Mary Tyler Moore in Paris in 1938. It's interesting, too, because that scene where she meets her boss and she meets Violet, the assistant, we know that something is intriguing about both of them, the way that her boss greets her and treats her and comes to think about her. And also Violet, the assistant, who has a Birkin bag, if I remember, and she's in a haute couture, and you think, she doesn't seem like an assistant. And the use of fashion in this novel, we're talking about The Paris Mystery by Kirsty Manning, the use of fashion in this novel as power and almost disguise and clues is really wonderful. It's not just about fancy lovely couture clothes, but it's about the power of those clothes and the meaning. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, well, I think the joy of fashion, I just think it's quite transformative, and it is a way that you can identify characters in a very tight novel very quickly by what they're wearing, whether they're dressing for comfort, whether they're dressing, like Barack Obama style, the same two things every day, so they don't have to make a decision. And in the case of Violet, the fashion, the high fashion that she wears, as you pointed out, is a clue that there's no way an assistant on a news desk, let alone a journalist, even the top journalist, would be able to afford a Birkin handbag. So who is this woman? Why is she toting on a train station in Paris with a Birkin? And she comes into work, and it becomes one of Charlie's favorite things is to guess what Violet's wearing. And actually, Violet is the assistant, is the person who takes Charlie under her wing and really teaches her the power of that lies within Charlie. And I guess she dresses Charlie in a way that Charlie begins to see herself in a different light. Clothes can be quite transformative. I do not believe for a second, if anyone is listening, that clothes maketh the man. But I think there is something in especially with haute couture, where the dress is designed to fit someone. They've taken the time to think about how a piece of clothing is made, and then you slip it on your body. Not that I have ever worn a Dior dress. But should the opportunity arrive, I am here for it. I imagine it does make you feel quite like something in a fairy tale. So I wanted to capture that kind of magic and awe that we have about any beautiful piece of art,
Yes, any beautiful piece of art. And that is lovely. It's interesting, though, too, that Lucy Worsley's book about Agatha Christie talks about how one of the things that Christie did was use clothing as a way of shorthanding who someone is. And sometimes she used clothing as a deception, to lead you astray about who someone was. So I just love that you did that, too. Did you think about that?
I did think about it a lot. I thought, to have a woman like Lady Ashworth, she dresses in very carefully curated cashmere, I guess you would say capsule wardrobe now.
Mm-hmm.
But then she brings out the big guns for the party. The men dress in, I guess the men are very graded in what they wear in terms of whether it's a woolen suit, whether they're in uniform. And there is something about a person in their military uniform. And what does that say? It commands respect. And what does it say when a person is out of uniform? I think people who have been in the military often carry themselves very differently, and they can have the uniform taken away from them, but they are still identifiable as a military person. So so you can have a bit of a play with that. So
I mean, it's wonderful. And your readers are smart readers. We're talking about the Paris mystery, and they will latch on to those clues. But I need you all to know that this isn't a book about fashion. This is a book about crime and power and interwar Paris. And it is powerful and engaging and educational as well. Talk a little bit about the role of women in Paris at that time, and also in this book. It's surprising, and they're extremely powerful in their own way.
They are. I mean, I think unusual, and that's why I sent Charlie James to Paris, because certainly she didn't have the autonomy to go about her work the way she would have in an Australian newsroom. I should say, as the readers would know, 1938 Paris was a very free, liberating time. They're almost naive about what was happening and gathering in the rest of Europe. They were really celebrating life and self-absorbed almost in their lives. And I think at that moment, the women I wanted to give different roles to. So Violet, we hear that she speaks 7.5 languages, and her Russian isn't great, but it's good enough for the shenanigans she gets up to. So I wanted to point out that while women were still being educated, it was really hard for them to get a job and stay working. I mean, the presumption with Pilot was that she would work until she got married, and and then at that point she wouldn't work. I needed Charlie to be a journalist because it just wasn't plausible. When you're writing a mystery, you really need, as you well know, you need the person uncovering the crime to be have agency and to get around to speak to people. And it just wouldn't have been the case that there would have been a female police officer in any position of authority that would have been able to leave the office. She would have been a typist in Paris. So that wasn't going to work. For me, Lady Ashworth, she was an American heiress. As I said, she was based on a real person who, while it's easy to dismiss, she made money actually in New York, decorating for the Vanderbilts. She was the person who discovered just paint the rooms lashings of white, and what women really want is storage. And so she kind of made a ton of money importing antiques and homewares essentially, and shipping it back to the great houses of America. And she kind of was the top interior designer of the day. And so based on that, she bought a house in Versailles, and that became, and decorated it, spent 10 years doing it up and decorating it. But she wasn't just a superficial person. She gathered people in salons, a range of people from aristocracy to artists to poets. She sponsored the ballet during the First World War. Her father was a doctor, so she was the one who really showed people on the ground in Paris, ostensibly a socialite, how to treat burns patients with ambergris. So she was really meaty, and at that time she opened up her house to be a recovery centre, and she actually worked on the boat. So the women are really quite extraordinary. And there's another woman, an American journalist that Charlie comes across, and she's not overly friendly to Charlie. This is her stomping ground. And it's very clear from the clothes she wears and the ease that she wears it, back to your point, that she was born to this upper level of society. She's not pretending like Charlie. She is a person of silk cloth. But even so, people like to denigrate her because she is a woman as a journalist, and they maybe imply that she got the job because of her connections with one of the top magazines, and that's not the case. And Charlie says, it's very, very difficult to work as a journalist at the best of times as a female. And so she, even though this woman is particularly frosty to her, Charlie will defend her right to do her job.
And they have such a great relationship. It's so interesting how much this book, we're talking about The Paris Mystery by Kirsty Manning, how much this book is about relationships. And Charlie's relationship with Inspector Renard the police inspector, is also unpredictably wonderful. Talk a little bit about him and about that relationship.
Look, I didn't want to write the quintessential police inspector, but as you know, in writing, there's no quintessential police inspector, but they do need, journalists do need somebody to get information off of what's happening in the case. And also, I wanted him to be kind of a pointer to French culture, but not be a cliche. So he is a man of his time, and he's a man of his city, and he's delightful. He's efficient. He has some of the French skepticism, I would say, towards foreigners. But he's not an idiot. He listens to people, but he's not one for catastrophizing. He's not one for speculation. He is a man who deals in facts. He's very efficient at his job. And I just wanted to point out his efficiency, but also give a joy. I always like writing about food and wine. And I thought, well, I just wanted to show, I guess, the breadth of his character over food. I didn't want to write about food per se, but it's a good way of showing, like clothes, what they eat and how they eat is a good
Yes,
way of showing
exactly.
characters who they are. And so I wrote a really fun scene where Charlie goes to meet him, but she catches him just before lunch. And so he says, well, you can come and join me for lunch. And of course, he's French. He's not having a baguette at his desk. He's going out for his modestly priced, um, lunch of the day, and which is very popular in Paris, still is. You can get 2 courses and a glass of wine or a half a carafe of wine for a very modest amount. So it's plausible on a police person's salary. And he goes for lunch and he says to Charlie, come on, I'll talk about it, but you come and have lunch with me, because I'm not interrupting. Will um, the French will not give up their lunch break.
Right,
But anyway,
exactly. Very wise. Well, another
yeah,
reason we love the French. Another reason.
yeah, so
Melissa T is saying, love reading with food and wine. And it's interesting too, because food and wine are so revealing about who people are. But what Charlie James wants to do is cover crime. And she's told, she's probably going to be given the fashion beat, the socialite beat, all these sorts of things. And then after she goes to the party, does as she's told. And then there is, as you say, something goes very, very wrong at the circus ball. Talk about Charlie's need or desire or her ambition to write about crime, and whether that was reasonable at the time or whether that was shocking at the time, and how she manages to do that.
It was quite shocking. I think, I guess your audience members would know, in the early 30s in Australia, and also in the English papers that she wrote for, and late 30s, women were confined to writing. They had the women's pages of the newspapers, and there would be, what silk stocking to wear. There'd be a bit on lipstick. There'd be a bit on, whoever was engaged to whoever. There were 1 or 2 narrow pages just for the women folk, and women were assigned to work on it. And Charlie had worked on a homicide in Sydney, but she'd only got that chance to have a homicide when somebody had not been able to turn up to cover the story that day. They conveniently got appendicitis or something like that. So she got to prove herself only when all the available people literally were unavailable. So in covering crime, she has a sharp mind. And I think with covering crime, you do have to look at what people are telling you and what people are not telling you. And it's a very difficult process. And in developing the character of Charlie, I talked to a lot of journalists. One of them, who is a very popular American journalist for a time, Sarah James, who the character is named for, is one of my close friends. She was a correspondent with NBC and very, very clever woman. And she told me how to sit with someone in an interview and just give them the space to run. So you ask them the question, and if they're awkward, you give it a beat, let them answer, see what happens in those silences. And she said the silences are as important as the words they use. So in formulating Charlie, I really, spoke to real journalists who had worked as foreign correspondents in different cities, who had covered, heinous crimes, actually. And I didn't want to put a heinous crime in this particular book because that just wouldn't have worked with the readers. I feel like this is a book you can come to. I mean, there's no gentle murder, but
no, but there's not graphic violence. I mean, it's not.
Yeah, but it's at the Agatha Christie end. It's not.
I mean, I've been a television reporter for 43 years. And I can vouch for the authenticity of Charlie, how she behaves, how she thinks, what she wants, her ambition, the way she negotiates her way through, the way sometimes she behaves as if the way she thinks someone might expect her to, in order for the greater good, which is to get what she wants to have happen. So we love Charlie, who was saying, somebody in the comment was saying, I already love Charlie, says Priya. Welcome, Priya. And Kim is here and Sharon is here. And everybody is applauding you in the comments. Don't forget, you have about 10 more minutes to leave a question or a comment for Kirsty and win a copy of this gorgeous, gorgeous book. Not this one, because I am keeping this one. Anyway, another thing that you do so gorgeously is that 1938 Paris, we know what was about to happen, but they didn't. And you know, as an author, what was about to happen, but you have to always remember that they didn't. Talk a little bit about, sort of false foreshadowing and how you had to stay away from that, if you did.
Yeah, well, it's always a bit fun to play with as a, thank you, it is very high praise. It's very fun as a writer to play with what the audience knows. So the audience obviously does know the time frame, and they know that there is the dark shadow of World War II looming over Europe. And so as a writer, that is a gift to play with, because I don't have to spell it out, but you can play up characters that indicate, whether they're a positive or a negative, and leave readers to draw their own reviews. So in this instance, there's a British diplomat, Lady Ashworth's husband, and he's been kind of evicted from the central circle of London. So from the top, I guess, political roles, and sent to Paris as a bit of an outpost. So and there's a bit in the book where they just kind of lightly discuss and dismiss, that crazy Churchill, banging on about the Germans, they're over. And it's just not the case, as we know. That,
and it's heartbreaking. I mean, it's heartbreaking.
On the money. It was like,
I mean, it's great that you use it. It's great. It's very, it also, it draws the reader in. It makes the reader feel smart, because this is another reason that there's more to this book than a fun, frothy mystery. It is a wonderful inside look at Paris. And that's what I was thinking about. And then we'll go to your questions in about one more question. It's called The Paris Mystery, not only because it takes place in Paris, but because I love when you do that, because Paris itself is a mystery to Charlie and to everyone who lives there at the time. Talk a little bit about that sort of double entendre title.
Well, Paris is a mystery. It kind of reveals itself in layers. And, it's a city of light, the city of love. There's a lot of literature, bookshops, fashion, but it can feel very much, when you're there as a tourist, that you are ambling down the beautiful avenues and on the cobblestones, just looking in. You're looking at the bookshops, you're looking in at the fashion windows, but it can feel very intimidating to actually, I don't know about you, but I'm I love writing about fashion, but in my real life, I'm pretty daggy, except in Paris. And, but it can feel, for everyday people like me, it can feel quite like otherworldly, like something to admire, but how do you get that foot in the door? How do you move through that world? And so she struck with that initially, and her way in is through the thinkers, the bohemians, the artists. And I mean, that's a thing that I really wanted to talk about. I wrote about Paris as a place, but it's quite transformative. I mean, people went there. There are a lot of American writers that went there at that time, and it became very much a place. There's one impression of Paris, which is the smart, the great food, but it is a place of ideas. It's always been a place where ideas have been shared. You go to the cafes, people are discussing philosophy and big kind of matters of the world. And that is very accessible for someone with a brain like Charlie. So people warm to her, and you can kind of transcend that kind of engagement of ideas, transcends class in Paris. And yes, you can really transform and be who you really want to be at the heart of yourself in Paris. And that's why it became such a popular place for writers, bohemians, artists, fashion people. And still to this day, when people are kind of running away or wanting a reset, they'll often go to Paris. I mean, there's lots of books about it, including mine.
Lots of
When
books,
they're
including this. I always think of the movie Midnight in Paris. And I
Mm,
think, oh my golly, that would have been fun. Although there was one great line in the movie. Did you see that? Do you know
I did,
Midnight in Paris?
yeah.
The line where someone says, "Oh, I wish I had lived here. I wish I could, live here all the time." And someone else says, "Frankly, I'd rather live somewhere where there's Novocaine." So that does, there are things that are better. But Paris is amazing. It's mysterious. It's magical. You capture that so gorgeously. And for all of us crime fiction fans here at Crime Time, the mystery is wonderful and Christie-esque, and we absolutely adore it. Will there be more Charlie James books?
There will be. It's going to be a series. So I'm working on book 2 as we speak.
That's fantastic. Is it set in Paris as well? Can I
It
ask?
is Paris and a little bit outside Paris. So
I love that. Oh, we
just
cannot wait.
a few day trips for the readers.
I love that. Can't go wrong with day trips from Paris. You all, it's time for questions for Kirsty. If anyone has a question or a comment for Kirsty, Priya, hi Priya. It says, do you make a character sketch of your key characters before you write the stories? What do you include in it?
Great question. I don't do a formal character sketch on paper. You will probably be mortified. I do a lot of walking, and I formulate my ideas of characters. So for Charlie, I had a few ideas of her, and I keep a diary. And I start kind of putting down keywords. So I guess I do that, but it's not in one hit situation. And then I'll start thinking of who the side characters are, the inspector, Lady Ashworth, and I'll have a play. And then by the end, I'll have a list of characters. So I guess I do, but it's not, I would love to say I do it in a methodical way, but my book kind of comes with the central, it's often place first that comes an era, because I write historical fiction, and then the character comes, and then once I get an idea of the main character, who she is, invariably I'll come and start thinking about who the other characters are, and then you find that you might have an idea for 3 characters, but they actually have to become one person, just because it becomes a bit unwieldy in a book to have a cast of thousands, especially in a murder mystery. It gets confusing. So you kind of have to work out who your key players are, and then
And you do such a good job of that. I mean, the characters are easily differentiable. Differentiable, is that a word? I know you can tell them apart so easily,
Yeah.
and you really do a great job. I'm very envious of anyone who makes any kinds of bios about their characters in advance. I have no idea. I just have no idea, and then they just grow as they have to make decisions, and we learn who they are along the way. So that can be a journey. That can be a journey. Great
I
question.
often get to know my characters as I'm writing the book, which is maybe a bit more, I'd love to be that person who has like a set idea, but I often have an idea of their backstory, and often I find in my first draft that I will write, like there were quite a number of scenes where Charlie has flashbacks to her time in Sydney, and they actually didn't make it through to the final cut. But maybe they'll make it in the next book. I don't know.
But we don't need them. Maybe you needed to write them to know them.
Yeah.
We don't need to read them. We totally get her as the book goes along. We have time for just 2 more questions. Who else has a great question? Hi, Kathy. Kathy says, sounds like a wonderful book. Love both covers. Why do they create different covers for each market translation? I like the Aussie version best. And are either cover dresses in the novel? That's a great question, Kathy. Why? We have no idea.
That is a great question. That's the Australian, in case the people read it. This one's the Australia one, and this one's the US one. They're not specific dresses in the novel. She does wear a blue dress, and the cover designer has interpreted it how they will, but beautifully in both cases. I love both covers, I should say. They're like my children. Love them both equally. But with covers, look, it's an interesting thing. And you will know this, Hank, that when your books are published in multiple territories, you don't get a lot of say actually in the covers because it's generally a marketing decision. The idea is that the marketing team, and I trust the marketing team in their territory to know what is best, because the idea of a cover is you've really got a split second in an airport or a bookshop for somebody to look at the book and pick it up. And then, so the first job is to pick up the book. And then the next job is for them to look at the back and read the blurb. And you've got, that much time to do it. So I trust that the marketing people in their different territories know what it's like. All my Australian books are completely different to my American covers, I should say. My American covers are very tactile, they're very beautiful. My books are very weighty, historical. They've got quite a literary feel. In Australia, they tend to be like more open face on the cover. Australian readers, they find that accessible. They find it easier. It doesn't look like a deep, sad war book.
I so agree with you. The marketing people and the cover people know their audience, and they know what they're doing. We're all in this together, but we each have our roles that we play, and luckily often ours are to say, great job, I love this. Right, but we have one more question. Oh, there's so many more questions. Have you spent, this is a perfect question. Andrea says, hey, Andrea, have you spent time in Paris? Do you speak French?
I do. I have spent a lot of time in Paris. I actually lived there for a while, and I did go to Alliance Française to learn to speak French, which I am completely terrible at. I can understand a little French, but I've never practiced it enough. I think it's on my retirement list to go and speak it properly. My children, we actually took the kids out of school for a term. We put them in school over there. Don't worry. They're fine. They're at university now. They're educated. I didn't ruin their lives.
We wish our parents had done that for us. I think it sounds great.
But they speak French, so they study French at school and enjoy it very much. And in fact, my eldest son went and did a gap year working in France, in Bordeaux. So it is a place that is a sentimental favourite for our family, and hopefully we'll be going back to for many years, so I can keep bringing you Charlie James books. Researching
we love Charlie, and we love Paris. One of my favorite Paris stories is that I was sent, of course, to be the one to rent the car. And I came out of the car rental place, and my husband said, well, did you get a car? And I said, yes. I think I either rented a car for $25 a day, or I just bought a car for $25,000, and we'll find out in a minute. Because I thought I kind of know these words, and it turned out to be fine. This is marvelous. It's been fantastic to talk to you, Kirsty. I keep forgetting that it is the crack of dawn for you. It's now almost 6 a.m. Oh, you lucky woman! Let's spin the wheel of fun and see who is the lucky winner of a copy of the Paris Mystery. And here are all the people who are here today. I love this. And the winner is Irma. Oh, how nice. Irma This is great. That's marvelous. Irma, we are so pleased that you are here today, and we will put up on the screen how you can contact me, and I will contact Kirsty, and she will contact the publisher, and then you will get your copy of the book, and it is marvelous. Kirsty, thank you. Thank you for getting up so early in the morning and I'm in awe of your red lipstick and your articulateness at this time. Congratulations on the book. Are you happy with it?
I am thrilled with it. It was just a bit of an adventure to write, and it's always good to learn a new skill. It is as writing crime is very tricky, and it was just a glorious new challenge for me, and I really enjoyed it.
We are thrilled with it. Thank you for being with us this morning. And I do mean morning. For all of you who are with us on Crime Time, stay tuned. In about 15 minutes, we'll have Crime Time at 4 p.m. ET. We'll be interviewing Ennis Vance, whose book Hush Harbor is just out. It is riveting and powerful, a debut. We love debut novels. I cannot wait to talk to him. And this is going to be quite amazing. So go get a cup of coffee, go get a cup of tea. Kirsty, you go take a nap, and we will see you all at 4 here on Crime Time. Thank you so much for coming. And remember, it is always safe inside a book. And we will see you in 15 minutes.